Troll! Hey aficionados, Sean,
Miguel,
and today we're going troll hunting. That's right, we're talking about a nice little film out of Norway. It is a science fiction mockumentary following a troll hunter and these three college students. Basically, they're hunting trolls. This guy, his job is to hunt trolls. He's basically working for the government, and there's this big conspiracy cover-up thing in order to hide that trolls exist in Norway. And he decides that he's fed up with this. He's tired of being this pawn of the government, and he allows this college film crew to follow him around and document his exploits.
So it's a pretty simple setup, but it's very effective, especially considering that the film is presented in a found footage format. So kind of like the Blair Witch Project, we're given to understand in the intro that this film has been found, and they sort of pieced it together to see what it was all about, and none of the people who were found on the footage are still alive, or they haven't been able to find them at least. So it has an aura of mystery to it, and throughout the whole film you're wondering, like, okay, what eventually happens to all of these people? Because right from the get-go, we understand that the only thing left of their exploits is this film.
And in terms of the found footage aspect of the film, I usually find some found footage films to be a little bit distracting in terms of the camera movement. Sometimes it can be a little bit jarring, but I think that they were pretty reserved with this movie. They only used like the jarring camera motions when it was a scene that was very tense or when they're being chased, which makes sense. Otherwise, the filming of the shots was done pretty well, which kind of makes sense too because these are amateur filmmakers, so you would assume that they would know how to frame certain shots and how to hold a camera still if they're not being chased by trolls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you look in the making of the film too, it's a professional film crew that's handling the camera, so it doesn't feel like the Blair Witch Project, which was like the actors were literally passing the camera around, which made it all the more nauseating and kind of unsettling. But with this film, the film crew itself doesn't take so much of a center stage as the troll hunter. In fact, I mean, I really can't even remember the distinct characters of the film crew, which is a bit of a downside, I think. The cameraman in particular, who we find out during the cave scene, is a Christian. So the trolls are able to sniff him out. I really couldn't even remember his face. The female sound engineer, the one who holds the boom mic, is pretty memorable, probably also because she's the only woman in the film, only woman main character. And then the guy who gets rabies, he's also memorable because he gets rabies. So, but in terms of character, there's not really much there for them, especially because the troll hunter himself is such a distinct and memorable character.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, the troll hunter in this movie is on the level of something like Quint from Jaws. He's just this weathered veteran. You can tell he's been doing this his whole life. You can tell that he's seen things and has had experiences while hunting trolls and while serving in the armed forces, because they reveal that too as part of his backstory. You can just tell that he's been through a lot and that he's just kind of tired and he's had it. He just doesn't want to do it anymore. And you can just completely see that through his performance. And it's just the way that he talks about certain things is really interesting. Some of the most memorable scenes in the movie for me is just when he's sitting in front of the camera telling his story.
Exactly. And I think it's great too because I had kind of expected the troll hunter to be like a hermit who was just an angry hermit, angry at these students who were following him, but he ended up being a lot more complex than that, and he kind of wanted to tell his story because he was so tired of being basically abused by the government, just being used as a tool, not being given any recognition, and we can see that in his interactions with the government bureaucrat who's kind of his superior, but he ends up kind of in this almost fatherly role with the film crew, which is really endearing and kind of nice. And it's a change from what I would have expected from that stereotypical grizzled old man. He feels more professional, but at the same time, someone who's kind of past his limit and who's like ready to move on in life. So I think that they captured that really well with his performance.
And I think that they did a good job at avoiding something that they could have done easily, and that is making the troll hunter just this tough, badass guy that just, goes around guns blazing, killing trolls, and doesn't even care. You can tell that he doesn't want to be doing this. He doesn't want to be killing trolls. He thinks it's wrong. It's just something that he does because he has to do it. And you mentioned the fatherly role with the characters, and I thought that was really appropriate as well, because the one thing that I do remember about the college characters in this movie is just how they come off sort of as like playful and naive and almost immature in certain aspects. The one image that I get in my mind whenever I think of the college characters is that one character that's always on screen, the guy character, the one that gets the rabies. I just always have his smirk in my head for some reason, because I feel like he's just always laughing and smiling and goofing off about the certain aspects, like the trolls. Like, they all think it's a joke at first, and they're trolls. Trolls don't exist. So that's one of the big things that stood out to me from the college characters, was their innocence, I guess.
And I think the cinematography, which we discussed a little bit before, is absolutely excellent. And there are some scenes in the film that are way above what I would have expected from a found footage film, especially the level of atmosphere is incredible. I know, Sean, you told me before that one of your favorite scenes is the reveal of the first troll, where he's lumbering out of the forest, out of the tree line, and we're just watching the tree line, and we're watching the trees shake back and forth, and it's nighttime, so everything's dark. Just the atmosphere is incredible. The sound design, the sounds that the trolls make in the distance. I also love the flashing lights too, because the weapon of the troll hunter is this flashbulb, basically. So when he's out there fighting the trolls and the film crew is sort of standing back, you just see these flashes off in the distance. And it just kind of conveys a sense of how tiny and removed they are from what's going on. But for me, my favorite scene was toward the end, where they're in the cabin in the mountains. And that's another thing that's absolutely great. Just the settings, the diverse range of settings. You can really tell that this film crew understood their country and knew what the most dynamic places to film would be. And they talk about that too in the behind the scenes feature on the DVD. They talk about how they had to film on location because they wanted it to be believable for their audience, who was going to be mostly a domestic audience. But the scene in the cabin where it's nighttime and there's this howling sort of storm going outside, and you hear the biggest troll ever, lumbering outside. It's so eerie, and there's no music at all. It's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the sound design, and that was one thing that was very memorable to me. Specifically, like you mentioned, the noises that the trolls make. And you mentioned my favorite scene of the movie. That scene, along with a particular scene where they use goat as a bait, I just can't help but make connections with Jurassic Park. A lot of things in this movie, you can tell that there was little inspirations from Jurassic Park. And also another movie we mentioned before, Blair Witch. You can tell that a lot of similarities there too. But one of the big things that strikes me with this movie is just the attention to detail when it comes to the trolls. They really create a backstory for these trolls. There's so much history with the trolls as well. Like, you can just tell that they really thought it out. The areas that each of the trolls live in look like areas that you would believe a troll could be living in. Something that big could go unnoticed in that area. And they really made sure to tie every loose end up. Even throughout the film, we would come up with something, be like, oh, that's kind of like a plot hole. But then they would address it later on and tie that loose end up. So again, just the attention to detail. They even come up with different species of trolls. So for example, they have the Ringlefinches and they have Jotnars. There's a couple other types of trolls, and even those trolls are broken down into subtypes. So they have the mountain trolls and the woodland trolls. And of course they live in those different environments and they have like different characteristics based off of that. It's just a really interesting concept. And again, they really treat it like it's a real animal.
Yeah, they even show a so-called battlefield where the mountain trolls and the woodland trolls will fight. And it's strewn over with rocks because the way they fight is they throw rocks at each other. And it's really funny, the troll hunter actually has like a little transparent piece of paper where he marks all the locations of the rocks. And he brings that with him and he sees if all the rocks match up to see if there's been any fighting recently. So again, those little details really just sell the whole idea. You can tell that a lot of this mythology is specific to their country and is specific to Eastern Europe and the kind of troll stories that they're given. So, for example, one of the myths about trolls is that they turn into stone when sunlight hits them. And I know that's not a fairy tale I grew up with. You know, I grew up with the old rhyme of, you know, fee fi fo fum, I smell the blood of a Christian man or an English man. So the fact that the trolls can smell the blood of Christians is something that I understand. But a lot of the extra mythology is based off of Norwegian, you know, folklore.
And the designs of the trolls themselves is incredible. I mean, I think the CGI was a little bit weak. One of the weakest aspects of the movie, may be the weakest aspect of the movie, but the designs of the trolls were excellent. I mean, little details is having one troll with 3 heads, but 2 heads are just basically decoys that they grow as they get older in order to scare off enemy trolls and to attract mates. I mean, they treat these trolls like they're actual creatures and animals, and it helps make it more believable.
Exactly. I even think I remember the second troll was missing an arm. And it's, again, those subtle details that really sell the universe as being one where these trolls are actually living creatures that are just eking out an existence like everyone else. But I do give credit to the film for leaving certain little things unanswered. Certain little mysteries just hanging there for you to consider and sort of let your mind fill in the blanks of how these trolls live and how they eat and sustain themselves. I think Troll Hunter mentions that they eat rocks, but we never see them eating rocks, and they seem to go after live prey. So that was something that I wondered about. But it's an interesting dilemma. It's not something that I'm like, oh, that's stupid, that doesn't make any sense. It's something where I think, that's kind of, I don't know, it leaves things open for different possibilities. But even though we do harp on the CGI, they use some pretty clever little cinematic techniques to sort of cover up the CGI job. So, for example, I mean, already it's found footage, so it doesn't look that professional. Sort of the shakiness, the out of focus nature of some of the shots helps it. Also, the graininess of the footage, and especially the night vision scenes. So, again, even though we harp on the CGI, they use it in a very clever way, and they use the camera to sort of downplay it and to make it easier for your eyes to accept the illusion. And for the most part, it does work. I think the cave scene in particular with the group of trolls was one of the strongest aspects of CGI use in the film, specifically because of those techniques.
And I think that they do a decent job with the pacing of this movie as well. There's a lot of downtime where there's just talking and stuff like that, but it doesn't get too tedious, and they jump immediately from troll encounter to troll encounter to troll encounter, and each troll encounter is very memorable. I mean, I can think of 4 specific troll encounters off the top of my head right now, and they're all equally memorable. Again, I mentioned the designs of the trolls are very memorable as well. Specifically the one at the very end that just leaves a huge mark on you towards the end of the film. I mean, it's like the exclamation point almost on the end of the at the end of the film. They really continue to almost up the ante, and it builds as the film goes on. And I really like how they sort of hint at that moment towards the beginning of the film, but it's a very subtle hint where they mention the type of troll and what it is. And then eventually you do get to see it, and when you do see it, it's almost awe-inspiring.
Yeah, it surprised even me, especially considering this is an indie film. I didn't think they would go for the level of scale that they did. I mean, honestly, it's something I would have expected out of a giant budget, big studio American action film. You know, something like a Jurassic Park or like, you know, a superhero movie or Godzilla movie or something.
So yeah, we would definitely recommend to check out this movie. As for a rating, we're going to give it 4 Ringo Finches out of 5. Again, it's a great horror-ish sci-fi type movie. Definitely not a perfect movie. Some weaknesses we mentioned, the CGI, slightly above something that you would see on something like the Sci-Fi Channel. But again, there are other aspects of the movie that are very strong, great attention to detail, and it's just a very well thought out movie, and for the most part, executed just as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. It is a great little independent film. Great if you're in the mood for found footage. Great if you're in the mood for creature feature. Yeah, check it out.
Until next time, thanks for watching.
See you later.